Imagine a Saturday night where you can't simply swipe right from the comfort of your couch, but instead have to physically leave your house, brave a cloud of cigarette smoke, or pay a small fortune to rent a VHS tape of strangers talking about their hobbies. Here are 10 ways people found love before online dating. For teenagers in the mid-century, finding romance was inextricably linked to the automobile. Cruising was the ritual of driving slowly up and down the town's main commercial strip, creating a rolling social network. Immortalized in the film American Graffiti, this tradition allowed young people to see and be seen without the supervision of parents. The mechanics were simple. You packed your car with friends, rolled down the windows, and blasted the radio. When you spotted a car of interested potential partners, you might rev your engine, shout a greeting, or pull into the local drive-in diner to initiate a conversation. It was a courtship dance performed at 10 miles per hour. The tradition began to fade in the late 80s and 90s due to rising gas prices, gridlock traffic, and strict anti-cruising municipal ordinances designed to stop loitering. Today, the idea of wasting gallons of gas just to wave at a stranger seems economically unfathomable. Long before Hinge or Bumble, the personal ad was the primary method for singles to broadcast their romantic availability to the masses. While the concept dates back to the late 17th century, it reached its zenith in the 1980s and 90s. In the back pages of newspapers, ranging from the respectable New York Review of Books to the gritty Village Voice, columns of text offered a coded language of desire. Singles were forced to condense their entire personality into 3 lines of expensive copy, utilizing a lexicon of abbreviations. SWM, single white male; DBF, divorced black female; or NS, non-smoker. The process was agonizingly slow. Interested parties had to write a physical letter to a P.O. box or the newspaper's intake department, which would then forward the mail to the advertiser. You could wait weeks just to find out if the poetry-loving Leo was interested in your reply. By the late 90s, newspapers introduced voice mailboxes, 1-900 numbers, where you could leave audio messages. But the rise of Craigslist and eventually Match.com rendered the print classifieds obsolete. Before the 1960s, bars were largely the domain of men, dark, smoky taverns where respectable women rarely ventured alone. This changed with the invention of the fern bar, credited largely to the opening of TGI Fridays in Manhattan in 1965. These establishments were specifically designed to attract single women. They featured faux Tiffany lamps, brass railings, comfortable seating, and, most importantly, an abundance of hanging fern plants to soften the atmosphere. The fern bar introduced sweet, ladylike cocktails like the Lemon Drop and the Harvey Wallbanger, creating a cocktail party vibe that felt safer than the local dive. For 2 decades, these venues were the ultimate meat market for young urban professionals. It was a space where eye contact across the room was the primary search engine. However, as the novelty wore off and hookup culture shifted to nightclubs and later to the internet, the Fern Bar evolved into the standard family-friendly chain restaurant, replacing the singles scene with potato skins and coloring books. If you had money to burn and a high tolerance for awkwardness in the 1980s, you joined a video dating service. The most famous of these franchises, Great Expectations, turned the search for love into a blockbuster video experience. Unlike modern apps, which are free or low cost, these services were an investment, often costing between $1,000 and $4,000 for a membership. The process involved visiting a brick-and-mortar office where you would be interviewed on camera. You would sit against a gray backdrop, usually with a potted plant, and answer questions about your ideal mate while trying to look natural under studio lights. Members would then visit the center's library, browsing binders of profiles before checking out the VHS tapes of candidates who caught their eye. It was a time-consuming ritual that required physical presence and significant financial commitment. The service died a slow death with the advent of digital video and the ability to upload a profile picture from home. But for a decade, it was the status symbol of a serious dater. For a vast stretch of the 20th century, the office was the number one place Americans met their spouses. In an era before remote work and Zoom calls, people spent 40 to 60 hours a week in close physical proximity. The water cooler wasn't just a metaphor, it was the village square where flirtations began. Companies even tactically encouraged it, viewing company couples as more stable and loyal employees. In 1990, nearly 20% of couples met at work. However, this declined sharply in the 21st century. The introduction of strict HR policies regarding interoffice relationships, the fear of sexual harassment litigation, and the blurring of work-life boundaries made dating a colleague risky. Today, with the rise of remote work and the gig economy, the shared physical space that fueled these romances has largely evaporated, dropping the workspace significantly down the list of ways couples meet. In the upper-crust society of the late 19th century, meeting someone was governed by strict etiquette. You couldn't simply slide into someone's DMs. You had to present a calling card. These small, stiff cards bearing a person's name were the currency of social interaction. A gentleman wishing to court a lady would visit her home and present his card to the servant at the door. The card would be placed on a silver tray in the entry hall for the lady or her mother to inspect. If the lady was interested, she might receive him. If not, he was told she was not at home, a polite fiction that signaled rejection. The cards themselves carried a secret code. Folding the top right corner might indicate the visitor came in person, while a fold on the left might indicate congratulations. This rigid system of gatekeepers ensured that romance was always supervised and socially sanctioned. The practice collapsed after World War I, as social barriers eroded and the telephone allowed for more direct, less formal communication. In the 1950s and 60s, high school romance was governed by the ritual of going steady. This wasn't just a relationship status, it was a visible exchange of property. A boy would give a girl his class ring, often wrapped in Angora yarn or tape so it would fit her smaller finger, or his varsity letterman jacket. This was a public declaration of exclusivity that signaled to the rest of the school that both parties were off the market. It was a rigid, binary system. You were either single or you were steady. There were no situationships or talking phases. The ritual provided a clear social script for teenagers navigating the new freedom of post-war America. However, as youth culture became more fluid and the age of first marriage began to rise, the intense possessiveness of pinning or exchanging rings in high school came to be seen as too serious for teenagers. Decades before the algorithm, there was the mainframe. In 1965, two Harvard undergraduates created Operation Match, the world's first computer dating service. For a fee of $3, students would fill out a paper questionnaire containing 75 questions about their personality, hobbies, and attitudes toward sex and religion. These forms were then manually key-punched onto cards and fed into a room-sized IBM 7090 computer. Weeks later, the user would receive a computer printout listing the names and phone numbers of their compatible matches. It was a cultural sensation, proving that people were willing to trust a machine to solve the chaos of romance. While primitive by today's standards, the computer merely looked for matching answers. It laid the psychological groundwork for everything that followed. The service eventually faded as the novelty wore off, and the delay of mailing computer printouts couldn't compete with the allure of the sexual revolution and the bar scene. Before you could stalk a potential date on Instagram to see what they looked like, you had to endure the blind date. This was usually orchestrated by a well-meaning aunt, a pushy coworker, or a friend who swore that you two have so much in common. The danger of the blind date was absolute. Once you opened the door, You were committed to dinner or drinks, regardless of the lack of chemistry. Unlike an app date, where you can ghost or leave after one drink with little consequence, the blind date carried heavy social collateral. If you were rude or bailed early, it got back to the person who set you up, causing family or workplace drama. It relied entirely on the social voucher system, trusting that your social circle knew your taste. As online dating provided a catalog of photos and bios, the willingness to walk blindly into a social encounter plummeted. Bridging the gap between the newspaper ad and the internet chat room was the telephone chat line of the late 1980s and 90s. Advertised on late-night television with catchy jingles, these were 1-900 numbers that charged by the minute. Callers would be connected to a party line, a chaotic group audio call with random strangers. You would shout over others to introduce yourself, and if you hit it off with someone, you could pay extra to go into a private room. It was expensive, anonymous, and often predatory. The bills would arrive weeks later, often shocking parents whose teenagers had spent hours talking to strangers. The service offered the first taste of digital anonymity, the ability to be anyone you wanted in the dark, but was quickly killed by the internet, which offered the same experience for free and with visuals. So, which of these courting rituals would you bring back for a chance at love? Let us know in the comments below.